Hello, I'm Bhavika Malaviya along with Monika Upadhyay, Vaishali Nimdiya and Hajra Kabadi are first year students of medical faculty at Kievan State Medical University. We are the members of group 3 and here is our video presentation on the topic Russian history.
So, at first, let's talk about the Russian lands before the 862 AD. Cimmerians control. Cimmerians were a mysterious people from Ural who attacked the Babylon and Assyrian Empire in the 8th to 7th centuries BC. Now, let's dwell upon the Scythians' control. Scythians were an Iranic people and they were known to have two major goals in life: horse trade and war. The Scythians influenced the Greek culture when Greek merchants established the trade colonies in Dnieper and Phanagoria in the 8th century BC. Sarmatians' control over the Russian land. 2nd century BC, Sarmatians captured the Scythia. Sarmatians were a group of Turkic tribes, with the islands being the most powerful. They were originally nomads, but soon settled down along the Black Sea coast with the Slavs. Goths replace of Sarmatians. 3rd century AD, the Goths from the Germanic lands conquered the Sarmatians and settled along the Dnieper and Don rivers. The rise of the Gothic power was under the rule of King Ermenrich II. Huns replaced the Goths. 4th century AD, the nomadic Huns swept to the region and allied with the local opponents of the Goths, Alans, Avars, and Entes. Together they fought and defeated the Goths. Now last but not the least of Russian lands before the 862 AD. The Khazar state established. 7th century Khazar state established, eventually rules from the Volga to the Dnieper. Trade was the major source of financial income for the Slavs. The likely mainstays of their economy were rivers like Volga, the Dnieper, and Dunay. Trade routes. Russian merchants traveled down the Volga, paying duties to the Bulgars and Khazars to the ports of Gurgan and Abaskun on the southern shore of the Caspian Sea. On occasion, they traveled as far as Baghdad. 20,000 Slavonic mercenaries even had occupied Syria within the Arab army. More than 228,000 Arabic coins have been recovered from over 1,000 herds in European Russia and the Baltic region. Almost 90% of this arrived in Scandinavia by way of the Volga trade route. 8th century Khazar ruling class adopts Judaism. Khazar state remains the leading power on the steppe until defeated in the mid-10th century.
Slavs were one of Antis tribe and they were inhabited from Central and Eastern Europe, but as the time flies, they become the powerful. Somehow this name was applied for greater number of people who settled in the area between Baltic, White, Caspian and Black Sea. 9th century. Slavs were divided into 12 tribal unions who settled between the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea by the 11th century. This tribal union were Polians, Travelians, Sverians, Dragovichas, and Radimichs, Whitich, Krivich, Ulich, Slovens, Dulebs, later known as Volhynians, White Croats, Tibetes. The earliest tribal centers of the East Slavs included the proto-town of Holmgard, Aldigia, Izborsk, Alaborg, Ljubza, Polotus, Gnezdovo, Saraskoye, Gorodiste, Timervio, and Kiev. Varangians. In 1862 AD, different tribes of the East Baltic region started a cruel war in order to establish their leadership over the lands. Referring to the primary chronicle, there was no law among them, and tribe rose against tribe. Discord thus ensued among them, and they began to war one against the other. They said to themselves, "Let us pick a prince who may rule over us, and judge us according to custom." Thus they went overseas to the Varangians, to the Rus. These particular Varangians were called Rus, just as some are called Swadesh, and other nomes are still other gods, for they were thus named, the Slavs. Oleg. During the next 35 years, the Rurik successor Oleg and his professional army subdued the various Eastern, Slavonic and Finnish tribes. Finally, about 880 AD, they captured Kiev, which was a main trade concurrent of Novgorod. Oleg killed Uskald and Dir, lords of Kiev, and joined the south of Russia to the north. In 907 AD, Oleg led a successful attack against Constantinople, and in 911 AD he signed a commercial treaty with the Byzantine Empire as an equal partner. Prince Igor. Third ruler Igor repeated his military and diplomatic success in 944 AD. Igor also tried to harmonize the sovereignty affected by his external policy. He fought against separatism of several tribes and finally was killed by Drevlans, who proclaimed their independence from central authority. The Igor's wife Olga became regent of the 3 years Igor's son Sviatoslav. Prince Sviatoslav, adept of a traditional paganism, gained the power. Sviatoslav's military conquests were astonishing. He abolished separatism of Slavonic Finnish tribes in alliance with Pachangis. He crushed two strongest neighbors of Kiev, Khazaria and the Volga Bulgaria kingdom, which collapsed soon after his raid. When the Byzantines involved Sviatoslav at conflict against Dunai, Bulgaria, they had soon to declare war to him because Russian victories and occupation of the area of a Byzantine's national interest. After a bloody battle at Dorostol in 971 AD, Sviatoslav had to quit Bulgaria because of political instability in Kiev and external menace to Russian lands. While he returned back, he was assassinated by Pachang's Khan Kuria. Prince Vladimir. The zenith of the state's power came during the reigns of Prince Vladimir I and Prince Yaroslav I. Both rulers continued the steady expansion of Rus of Kiev that had begun under Oleg. Vladimir rose to power in Kiev after the death of his father Sviatoslav I in 972 AD and after defeating his half-brother Yaropolk in 980 AD. As Prince of Kiev, Vladimir's most notable achievement was the Christianization of Rus of Kiev, a process that began in 988 AD. The annals of Rus state inform us that when Vladimir had decided to accept a new faith instead of the traditional idol worship of the slaves, he sent out some of his most valued advisors and warriors as emissaries to different parts of Europe. After visiting the Roman Catholics, the Jews, and the Muslims, they finally arrived in Constantinople. There they were so astounded by the beauty of the cathedral of Hagia Sophia and the liturgical service held there that they made up their minds there and then about the faith they would like to follow. Upon their arrival home, they convinced Vladimir that the faith of the Greeks was the best choice of all, upon which Vladimir made a journey to Constantinople and arranged a marriage between himself and Princess Anna, the sister of the Byzantine Emperor Basil II. Vladimir's choice of Eastern Christianity may also have reflected his close personal ties with Constantinople, which dominated the Black Sea and hence trade on Kiev's most vital commercial route, the Dnieper River. Adherence to the Eastern Orthodox Church had long-range political, cultural, and religious concerns. From the onset, the Kiev princess followed the Byzantine example and kept the church dependent on them, even for its revenues, so that the Russian church state were always closely linked. Reign of Yaroslav. Yaroslav I, known as the Wise, also struggled for power with his brothers. Although he first established his rule over Kiev in 1019 AD, he did not have uncontested rule of the whole Rus until 1036 AD like Vladimir. Yaroslav was eager to improve relations with the rest of Europe, especially the Byzantine Empire. Russia of Kiev played an important genealogical role in European politics as well. When most legal codes of Europe regarded torture as a preferred way of eliciting truth and often abused the death penalty, the Ruska Pravada confined punishments to fines and did not provide for capital punishment at all. Certain inalienable rights were accorded to women, such as property and inheritance rights. Yaroslav the Wise built St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev and St. Sophia Cathedral in Novgorod, patronized local clergy and monasticism, and it is said to have founded a school system. Yaroslav's sons developed the Great Kiev Pachaslavra, which functioned in Rus of Kiev as an essential academy by the 11th century. Rus could boost an economy and achievements in art, architecture, and literature superior to those that then existed in the western part of the continent. Reign of Vladimir Monomach. After the death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054 AD, the Rus of Kiev was not able to maintain its position as a unique, powerful, and prosperous state. As the Rurikids became more numerous, they identified themselves with the regional interest rather than with the larger patrimony. The principle of the family scale was violated by other members of the ruling clan who cannot get a supreme power within the framework of such a political system. Thus, the princes fought among themselves, frequently forming alliances with the outside groups such as the Cubans, Poles, and Hungarians. Finally, Prince Vladimir Monomach initiated a summit in Lubech in 1097 AD. A new political principle stopped the amalgamation of disparate lands, but it started the feudal fragmentation of the Rus under Vladimir Monomach and his son Mstislav the Great. Kiev stayed the strongest military power which formally united the Russian lands and protected them from nomadic invasion. Novgorod always played the important role in Russian history. By economical view, Novgorod Republic prospered as the northern part of the Russia of Kiev because it controlled trade routes from the Volga River to the Baltic Sea and colonized a huge northern area. In consequence of the military aid provided to Vladimir the Great and Yaroslav the Wise in the wars among Rurikids, Novgorod gained a partial political independence from Kiev. As the Rus of Kiev declined and Novgorod became more independent, the city was managed by a local oligarchy and clerics. From the 12th century, Novgorod acquired its own archbishop, a sign of increased importance and political independence. In the end of the 13th century, Novgorod joined it to the Hanseatic League, the phosphorus alliance of Baltic cities that dominated the commercial activity of the Baltic region between the 13th and the 17th century. Only after two bloody battles on Neva River in 1240 AD against Swedish army and on the Pepper's Lake in 1242 AD against the Livonian order, the European expansion was stopped by the Prince Alexander Nevsky. However, the Livonian Knights menaced the Novgorod and Pskov because their political goals and military power till 1412 AD. In the end of the 15th century, Novgorod and Pskov were annexed by the Moscow state. Alexander Nevsky, Prince of Novgorod, Prince of Pereslav, Grand Prince of Vladimir, legendary commander who won European crusaders and stopped their move to the east.
Policy. Prince Rurik. He is the foundation of Rus. He ruled the town of Novgorod. He gave his name to the first Russian ruling dynasty. He died in 879. Prince Oleg Vesty. When Rurik died, Oleg became Novgorod prince. Novgorod economy was great. Strategic trade of route, known as a variant to the Greek. The new ruler proclaimed Kiev mother of Rus town. He died in 1912. Princess Olga of Kiev. In 945, Prince Igor died. Olga took power in her hand. She proposed the first legal tax. She was bring Christianity. She also honored with statue in history of Christianity, and she died in 11 July 969. Prince Vladimir, he became entire king of Rus. He chose new religion for Russia. He is an expert commander. In 1st September 988, he accepted baptism. He began minted gold and silver coin. Great contribution of development and Russian culture. He died in 15 July 1015. Prince Yaroslav the Wise, he was born in 978. He wrote Code of Law. He launched translation religion book from Byzantine Emperor in 1028. He established first large school in 1030. He founded first monasteries in Russia. On 26 November, he introduced as a Yuri Day in 1051. He appointed as the first Russian metropolitan election. He died in 1054. Princess Anna Yaroslavna, she was born on 1024. She is daughter of Wise. She is a queen of France. She died in 1075. Prince Andrei Bogolyubisky, he was born in 1111. His personality was very kind and not believe in violence. Andrei's silver invalid war ark can now be viewed at National Historical Museum in Moscow. He died in 28 June 1174. Prince Yuri Dolgoruki, he was born in 1090. He is the founder of Moscow, the first independent prince of northern eastern Rus. Few people called Yuri as alien because he was hungry for power and violence. He died in 15 May 1157. Prince Vladimir Monomakh, he was born in 1053. He wrote book instruction for children. He also introduced number of legal and economic reform. He died in 19 May 1125.
Hello everyone, my name is Hajra Kabadi and I would like to put your glance further to the next topic, that is the culture of Kiev Rus. Starting with Boris and Gleb. Boris and Gleb were the first saints of Kievan after the baptism of Rus by Saint Vladimir, the Grand Prince of Kiev, who contributed the land to Christianity in 988. They both were murdered during the wars, and the remnants were said to perform miracles. They both were interred at the Yashod Cathedral, which was named after them. According to the Metropolitan, Russian theological literature started using the word horror bearers after Boris and Gleb, and is applicable to those of Russian saints, as an example Jesus Christ, who underwent severe physical tortures followed by death. The primary chronicle says that their mother was Bulgarian. Some modern scholars argue that they both had different mothers and belonged to different age groups. Boris ruled the town of Rostov and Gleb was still a minor, ruled the easternmost town of Miron. Coming up to the next, Ilya Muromets, the son of Ivan. He was strong and fearless. It was said that he waves his mace to crush trees or simply uproot with his bare hands. He defeated the terrifying monsters Zemi and Sorovi. For nearly a million-year tales of Ilya Muromets have been passed on from generation to generation. Out of the three Russian folk heroes, the so-called Ilya Muromets, Obrenia Nikitic, and Alyosha, Ilya Muromets is the most famous one. According to the legends, Ilya Muromets spent the first 30 years of his life on stove. This was because of the curse put on his grandfather that prevented him from walking. Later, he went through some miraculous healing. He became the symbol of freedom and patriotism. Ilya Muromets was canonized as Saint Ilya Muromets in 1643. Ilya Muromets was later killed during the siege of Kiev in 1204. Next, we have Saint Anthony of Kiev. Saint Anthony of Kiev, also known as Anthony Pekosi, established the first Russian monastery, also known as Kiev Petrik's Lavra. It is considered as the father of Russian monarchism. He was born in the town of Lyubech. With the passing days, Anthony had a great contribution in the society and was believed to be great. Anthony always denied to be called as priest and never took the church rank. Anthony has to lead people out of the cave and start to build a church on a hill given to him by the monks. Rules of Kiev is Yaslav. Many local peasants, nobility, came to Anthony for blessing and advice. The burial place of Anthony of Kiev is not known. He prohibited the monks in search for his remnants.
Now that we have done studying the Kiev Rus establishment, now let's look upon the Tatar invasion on the Kiev Rus land. It all began when the Tatars invaded the Kievan Rus in the 13th century. Their state, the Empire of the Golden Horde, ruled over Russian lands for almost 3 centuries. But in 1380, a Muscovite prince, Dmitry Donskoy, won a major battle against the Tatars under the command of Khan Mamai at Kulikovo Field, the Battle of the Ice in 1242. Hoping to exploit the Russians' weakness after the Tatar invasion, the Teutonic Knights attacked the city of Novgorod. The German crusaders were defeated in a fight on Lake Peipus between modern Estonia and Russia. The first person that comes in mind whenever talking about the Tatars or the Mongols is none and only Genghis Khan. In 1246 AD, the Mongol clans were united under the leadership of Genghis Khan. In 1213 AD, their horse archers started conquest in China, Central Asia, Siberia, and Caucasus. At the Black Sea area, they faced Polovetians. Now let's talk about an important event that happened in the Kalka River. Grand Khan Kotiak asked Russian princess help to resist the Mongol army, as his daughter was married with the Grand Prince of Kiev. In response to this call, the disunited southern Russia prince joined armies and were involved into the war against Mongols on the Cuman side. Despite the allied forces were 3 times bigger, their troops were crushed by Parths at the Kalka River in 1223 AD. In 1235 AD, the Mongols began the campaign against the Western world in order to reach the ultimate sea. In 1236 AD, they conquered the Volga, Bulgaria, and subdued Mordovia. It took them a year to extinguish the resistance of local tribes and to establish a firm control over the region. Now let's speak upon Batu Khan. Batu Khan divided his army into smaller units, which ransacked all towns of the region: Rostov, Ulgich, Yaroslav, Kostroma, Kashin, Styatin, Gorodets, Pereslavl-Zalesky, Yuriev-Polsky, Dmitriev, Volokolamsk, Tver, and Torshok. The most difficult to take was the small town of Koselsk, whose boy Prince Basil and inhabitants resisted the Mongols for 7 weeks, killing 4,000. In the summer of 1238 AD, Batu Khan devastated the Crimea and suppressed Mordovia. In the winter of 1239 AD, he sacked Chernigov and Pereyaslav. After many days of siege, the horde stormed Kiev in December 1240 AD. In 1241 AD, despite the fierce resistance of King Daniel of Halich, Batu Khan managed to take 2 of his principal cities, Halich and Vladimir Volensky. Next year, the Mongols invaded Hungary and Poland. The astonishing defeats of European armies in Leganese and at the Skayot River in the April of 1241 AD left the Central and Western European at the mercy of invaders, and there was no military force to resist them. At the zenith of Batu's campaign in 1242 AD, the Grand Khan of Mongolia, Ogedei, suddenly died and the invasion was called off because political reasons. Finally, the Mongol princes divided their vast territory into khanates until 1480 AD Russia became vassal and ally of the western part of the empire known as the Golden Horde.
Yuri II of Vladimir. Yuri II sent his sons to oppose the invaders, but they were defeated near Nizhny Novgorod, having burned down the Kolomna and Moscow. The horde laid siege to Vladimir in February 1238. 3 days later, the capital of Vladimir, Suzdal, was taken and burned to the ground. The royal family and half of the inhabitants perished in the fire, while the Grand Prince retreated northward. He mustered a new army. In the Battle of the Shit River, Russian regiments were totally exterminated and Prince Yuri II was killed. So, in that dangerous time, the northeast and north remained without political leader and was unable to coordinate further efforts in order to resist the invasion. Tatar Mongol yoke. This term suggests idea of terrible oppression, but in reality these nomadic invaders from Mongolia were not such cruel, oppressive taskmasters as in generally supposed. It is very easy to exaggerate the influence and the effect of this overlordship which for 240 years the Russians had to endure. In many aspects the subjection appeared to be only nominal. They were extremely tolerant in religious matters. When they first appeared in Europe they were Samantist, and as such they had naturally no religious fanaticism. Mongols left many of Russia's cultural elements. Russians were allowed to continue worship under the Russian Orthodox Church, and the princes continued to rule. Also, by appointing a grand prince, the Tatars reinforced the idea among the Russians that the Grand Prince held dominion over Russia and the rest of the princes. Despite not being a political entity, the Russian people continue to be bound together by the ideology of the Russian Orthodox Church and by their cultural identity. Tatar rule. Tatar rule had its dark side also. When they occurred, they caused an incalculable amount of devastation and suffering. In the intervals, the people had to pay a fixed tribute. At first, it was collected in a rough and ready fashion by a swarm of Tatar tax gatherers. By about 1259 AD, it was regulated by a census of the population, and finally its collection was entrusted to the native princes so that the people were no longer brought into direct contact with the Tatar officials.
Alexander Nevsky. He was born on 13th May of 1220 in Perslav-Zaleski and also learned about negotiation. Local merchants and boyars had developed a system of self-government called Veche, and they chose Alexander as prince. He won Battle of Neva and Battle of Kulkikovo in 1380. He passed away on 12th November 1263. Ivan I, Khalita. He was born in 1288. He was a cruel politician. In 1326, he ordered to build first stone cathedral building in Moscow city. Before his death, Khalita became a monk. He passed away on 31st March of 1340.
Prince Dmitry Donsko. He was born in 12 October 1356. He was the first prince of Moscow to openly challenge Mongol authorities in Russia. He is dead in 19 May 1389.
Starting with the culture of the Tatar invasion, firstly we have the Sergius of Radunsky, a reformer of the monarchism in Russia and a religious and political figure. Sergius of Radunsky is highly honored by the Russian Orthodox Church and is considered a saint. He died in the year 1392. Speaking about his early life, Sergius of Radunsky was born into the family of boyar, that is nobleman, named Kirill, and his wife Maria was in the village of Vonitsky near the town of Rostov. Sergius later became a monk. Historical records mention different years in which Sergius may have been born, that is 1313, 1318, or even 1322. The Orthodox Church traditionally commemorates 3rd May 1314 as Sergius of Runasky's birthday. At the age of 10, young Warfalmli went to the same monastery where that time his older brother Stephen had already begun to serve. Seeking the strictest way of monk's life, including living in a desert, Warfalmli convinced his brother Stephen to leave the monastery. In 1335, they built little wooden church in the name of the Holy Trinity. In 1345, the Trinity Sergius Monastery was formed. Sergius became the priest and the second human, that is, the head of the monastery. Sergius became known for his sincerity by practicing the principle that he taught. The Metropolitan Alexei deeply respected Sergius and wanted him to become the next metropolitan of the Kiev and all Russia. The monk kindly refused this opportunity. Historians say that thanks to Sergius, by 1380, the most of the Russian princes recognized the power. Dmitry Donsky, the Prince of Moscow. This unification of the country helped to gather the best army forces for the well-known Battle of Kulikovo, fought by the Tatar Mughals and Russians on 8 September 1380. After the Battle of Kulikovo, Dmitry Donsky respected Sergius all the more. In 1389, the monk was invited to validate the Prince of Moscow last and testament which made legitimate the succession of Dmitry's eldest son to the throne. Sergius' followers founded about 40 monasteries in the northern part of Russia, spreading Christianity. Sergius died in 1392, and from until the present time, Orthodox Church has honored him saint. He was buried in the Trinity Sergius Monastery. Up to the next, we have Afanassy Nikitin. Afanassy Nikitin was a Russian merchant and one of the first Europeans to travel and to document his visit to India. He described his trip, a narrative known as The Journey Beyond the Seas. It is believed that the first Russian traveler to visit India was a Tver merchant, Afanassy Nikitin. He was born in the year 1433. Visiting India, Afanassy was unpleasantly surprised by the color of the skin of the locals and almost lack of clothes. I met many Hindu people, Nikitin said, and told them about my faith. The Indians told they believe in Buddha. There were 84 religions in India, but all believed in Buddha. Nikitin spent more than 2 years traveling to different cities of India. In 1471, Nikitin headed back home, but couldn't make it. Apparently, he died near Smolensk. In 1955, the city of Tver, the homeland of Afanassy Nikitin, a monument was erected to commemorate him.
On behalf of our group, I would like to thank everyone for watching this video. Have a nice day and keep learning.